Hello world, welcome to Sphinx channel. First of all, if you like this content, please subscribe to my channel. If this video was useful to you, like it and tell me your opinion in the comments. Well, this is the third part of the network series. Let's start.
Let us speak about how the Ethernet is implemented at the physical layer. Ethernet was once first implemented by a team called the DICS, Digital Intel and Xerox. They created and implemented the first Ethernet Neighborhood Area Network Specification, which is now normally known as the IEEE 82.3 Committee. This used to be a 10 megabits per second network that ran on a coaxial cable, then on the twisted pair cable, and today, finally on the fiber bodily media. The IEEE extended the 8023 Committee to two new committees known as 8023U, which is the Fast Ethernet, and 82.3AB, which is the Gigabit Internet, and then finally to 82.3A, that is the 10 gigabits per second Ethernet. When designing your LAN, it is without a doubt important to understand the specific types of Ethernet media available to you. Sure, it would be gorgeous to run Gigabit Ethernet to each desktop and 10 gigabits per second between switches, as nicely as to servers. The Electronic Industries Association and the newer Telecommunications Industry Alliance, that is the IATIA, together structure the standards body that creates the bodily layer specifications for the Ethernet. The IATIA specifies that Ethernet was used as a register jack, that is the RJ, an unshielded twisted pair cable. However, the enterprise is calling this just an 8-pin modular connector. In the next lecture, I will inform you a brief overview of the original IEEE 82 standards. Now, the next lecture is going to be very time-consumable, so make sure you have all your ears and eyes large open to focus on all these specifications. Now, let us have a look at the Ethernet specifications. The first is the 10-base-2. This is additionally known as a thin internet and can support up to 30 workstations on a single segment. It uses 10 megabits per second of baseband science or 185 meters of coax cable in length and a physical and a logical bus. What does 10-base-2 means? This capacity that 10 megabits per second and the base means baseband technology, and the 2 means nearly 200 meters. 10-base-5, also known as thick internet 10-base-5, uses a physical and logical bus with a UI connectors, 10 megabits per second baseband technological know-how and cooks up to 500 meters in length. 10-base-T, this is 10 megabits per second using class 3 UTP wiring. Unlike 10-base-2 and 10-base-5 networks, each machine must connect into a hub or a switch, and you can have solely one host per segment or wire. 100-base-TX, that is the IEEE 82.3 U100-base-TX, most commonly acknowledged as the Fast Ethernet, uses IATIA, Category 5 or 6 or 5E and UTP 2-pair wiring. It allows for one consumer per segment up to 100 meters long, and makes use of an RJ45 connector with a physical megastar topology and a logical bus. 100-base-FX and 100-base-CX, 100-base-T. 1000-base-T, 1000-base-TX, 1000-base-SXLX-TSRLR and now I won't be going into so much element of explaining all these standards because no one expects you to consider each and every of these requirements in detail. What I will do is I will attach a copy of all the requirements, or that is a PDF file, in the resources section. Make sure that you check the resources part to get the detailed description of all the IEEE 82.3 requirements so that we do not waste time in explaining what's not really needed. You just need to recognize the first 4. That is 10 base, 210 base, 510 base T and 100 base TX. Just need to be mindful that. So let us begin with a brand new section. In this chapter, I'll inform you all about the networking devices I've introduced so far. You should have heard the word names of hubs routers in previous instructions, and you might have wondered what these gadgets actually mean. Well, in this section I'll get into a good deal greater detail about every device. And yes, I'm going to present even greater of them to you in this entire section of networking devices. Now, due to the fact all the components that you'll analyze about shortly are typically located in today's networks and internetwork, it's very vital for you to be familiar with them. We'll start with the aid of covering the more frequent network devices that you would most probably come across, and then move on to talk about some of the most specialized common gadgets that you may or even may not locate running in a network. I'll finish this part by using examples on how to discuss routers, hubs and switches work within the Internet working models. By now you must be fairly savvy regarding the quite a number types of network media and connections. So it is time to learn about some of the devices they may hook up or commonly found on latest network. First, I'll define the basic terms. Then later in this section, I'll exhibit you how these devices actually work inside a network. At that time, I'll give you more distinctive descriptions of these devices and the terminologies associated with them. Now, due to the fact these devices connect community entities, they are known as connectivity devices. Now, here's a listing of the devices that I'll be teaching for the duration of this section. First is the network interface card. That is the NIC. Then we'll speak about hub, bridge, basic, switch, routers and firewalls, which are more important in present-day network. Then we will learn about ideas, IPS and HIDs. Don't worry about the full forms. I'm going to inform you the full forms in these upcoming sections. Access points wireless range extender. Considering that in today's world wireless networks have grown to be more important, we are going to talk about Wi-Fi range extender. And then DHCP servers. I hope you find this area very interesting, and I would like to tell you that please do now not skip a single lecture of this entire path, because we have worked day and night. Time to make this course as simple as viable for you. And we have explained all these examples with terms and terminologies in a very easy manner. So let us get started with the first networking device, that is the community interface card. Those of you who aren't familiar with the community interface cards probably prefer to be at this point. So here goes. A network interface card, NIC, is set up in your computer to connect or interface your laptop to the network. It provides the physical, electrical, electronic connections to the community media. The network interface card is a Layer 2 device. That is, it works at a statistics link layer. Actually, do you remember we have viewed the data link layer in the OSI model? Right, so the community interface card is known as a Layer 2 system because the information it makes use of for communication, the MAC address, it resides on data link layer. A community interface card is either an expansion card or is constructed right into the computer's motherboard. Today, nearly all NICs are built into the computer mom board, providing a speed of around 1000 megabits per second. Now, make sure that this is megabits per second and no longer megabytes per second. We have seen the differences in before sections. Nowadays, most PCs and laptops of all types come with an Ethernet and wireless connector constructed into the motherboard. So you usually do now not need a separate interface card. It's rare to discover a laptop today except a built-in wireless community card, but you can buy an exterior wireless cards for computers and laptops if you've got the legacy tools that needs them. So long story short, in short, you want to just remember that a community interface card is a chip which is installed in your computer that approves you to connect your computer to the network. Now, how this chip works and how this lets us to connect is not a phase of the basic fundamentals of computer networking. It goes extra into electronics. You just have to remember the functioning of the community interface card, that it is used to connect your PC to the wireless network. The subsequent lecture, we will talk about an interesting system known as the hub. You have heard hub many a times from me. So in the subsequent lecture, we will explore what a hub actually is. Well, in the preceding 2 lectures, we have seen what a network interface card is and the basic devices which we are going to learn in this section. Now it is time to move on to the next system, that is the hub. You have heard hub a million times from me throughout this lecture. And in this lecture, I will inform you more about a hub. So as you learned earlier, a hub is a machine that connects all the segments of the network together in a superstar topology. So as the hub has no intelligence, it is a layer 1 device. So basically, what is a hub? It's a device which is used to connect 2 or greater network segments together. So it acts as a central point. We have seen in the megastar topology that the central device which connects all the hosts is a hub. Now in that case, the hub was related to all other computers. Similarly, different community segments can be used to connect together via a hub. Now, hub has no intelligence. What does it mean? What is a no-intelligence device? Basically, a no-intelligence gadget is a device which does not apprehend any frames or data packets that are sent via it. For example, consider a network of having 5 PCs, let's say A, B, C, D and E. Now you need to visualize what I'm telling you. So suppose if a PC wishes to send data packet to body E, so when the data packet passes through the hub does now not recognize that this packet is only meant for frame E. I'm sorry for host E. It randomly sends the packets to all the hosts, and that is why it is a no-intelligence system. Now, each device in the community connects directly to the hub through a single cable, and it is used to join multiple devices except segmenting a network. Any transmission received on one port will be sent out to all different ports in the hub, including the receiving pair for the transmitting device, like I explained a couple of minutes ago. So essentially this means that if one station sends a broadcast to all others, will receive it, but on the addressing found on the frame is one of a kind and it is intended only for the recipient. Now, this association simulates a physical bus that the CSMA-CD standard was once based upon. Don't worry about this terminologies, CSMA and CD. I am going to give an explanation for all these in the upcoming lectures. So again, do not skip any lecture. However, if there have been 20 users on one PC, and if suppose one laptop wants to personally chat with some other PC, the entire message gets delivered to all the hosts. This consequences in the wastage of resources, wastage of electricity, and that is why hub is not used for today's resources. Because in ultra-modern networks there are millions of PCs connected to every other, and you don't want the message to be delivered to all of the last hosts on the network. So what you need to take note about hub is that hub is a no-intelligence device and it is simply used to connect all the network segments together. A broadcast dispatched out by any device on the hub will be propagated to all the gadgets connected to it. You have to remember this due to the fact this might be asked in the query where you have to tell the distinction between a hub and a bridge. So in the next lecture, we'll speak more about bridge. In the last lecture, we talked about a hub which essentially connects different network segments together. But I additionally told you that hub is a non-intelligence device, which potential it transfers segments packets to all other devices. In this lecture, we are going to talk about a bridge. A bridge specifically, an obvious bridge is a network device that connects two comparable network segments together. Its primary feature is to keep traffic separated on both sides of the bridge, breaking up the collision domains as you can see on the screen. Now on the screen, you can see that I'll take the example of a S so you can surely see laser boundary, yes. So now this segment is now suppose this laptop computer wants to communicate with this PC, so if it was once a hub here, this laptop would Send a packet to this hub, and unnecessary. The hub would transmit the packet to this PC, to this PC, to this PC and to everyone. So what a bridge does is essentially it separates this traffic from this traffic. So you don't want to actually send every packet to every different device. Then transmission is allowed to pass through the bridge solely if it is intended for the opposite side. For example, if this PC wishes to send the packet to this PC, then only the bridge will enable the packet to pass. And that is why sometimes some network gurus also call bridge as insensible. Hub. Basically, it is transmitting the packet to and through in the network. It is the same feature as the hub. But in this case, bridge is using its mechanism to actually see if that packet is truly intended for the opposite facet of the network. It just doesn't maintain on transmitting random packets to each and every receiver. Now bridge makes use of MAC address to make forwarding decisions. And hence bridge is viewed as a layer 2 device. Now, bridge and switch are almost comparable. The term bridge and switch are regularly used interchangeably because the two devices frequently use the bridging technologies. The past tense is for a reason. Reason you'd be tough pressed to buy a bridge today. So keep shopping for bridge, but make sure that you really understand the difference between bridge, hub, and a switch. It is without a doubt very important that you understand all these differences. So as a ways as this course goes, this course is a whole comprehensive course which will be virtually helpful if you want to ask the interviews for networking. So make positive that you understand each and every concept very clearly. If you have any questions you're now not sure about anything, you can ask question anytime. We'll be attempting to answer your question inside 48 hours. And before transferring ahead, I would like to request you, it's my kind request that you please price our course because your comments is very valuable to us. If you're no longer liking our course, if you're not completely satisfied with some things, please mention it in the feedback. Or, if you're truly enjoying the course, you can rate a path a 5-star due to the fact these feedbacks help other college students to learn what you are learning. And if you're no longer enjoying anything, we can always enhance this course. So till this, we have seen what a hub means, what a bridge potential. Now it's time to see what a switch means. Now, switches join multiple segments of network together, a good deal like hubs. But there are 3 significant differences. First is a switch acknowledges frames and pays attention to the supply and the destination MAC address of the incoming body as well as it recognizes the port O, n which the body was received. Now, what are ports? I mean, what are you talking? What are ports now? Please explain. Don't worry. Ports are specific inside gateways or interfaces through which specific archives or data is transmitted. For example, there is a port FTP on which the file transfer protocol is working and it approves only the traffic of the file switch protocol on that port. Similarly, another port is for HTTPS or Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which lets in traffic through the Internet, that is the Internet applications. Don't worry, in upcoming sections, there are a few lectures on ports and port numbers and port forwarding. You will get to it here in that section. But as far as this part goes, just remember that change recognizes the port on which the frame used to be received. Now, a switch makes each of its port a special singular collision domain. Now, hubs don't do all these things. Hubs do not understand frames and they do not pay attention to the supply and the destination MAC address. They just hold on transmitting the frame wherever the community is connected. So how does the switch works? Now, listen carefully. I'm simply telling you the working of the switch. So if a switch determines that a frame's final vacation spot happens to be on a segment that is linked via a different port than the one on which the again end was at first received, the switch will only ahead the frame from that specific port on which the vacation spot is located. so it won't transfer all the packets on all the special ports. For example, again, use a laser here. Yeah, so let's say this port is intended for file transfer protocol. So if a system sends the packet to file transfer protocol, and if the file transfer protocol is meant for another device, the packet will only go via the network or the PCs which are connected to file switch protocol. It won't be transmitting the packet to all other one-of-a-kind ports. And that is why switching or port forwarding is very important in networking. Most of the questions that you will face in the interviews will be focused a great deal on switching. How are switches used? And let me tell you one thing. Switches have made networking surely easy. So if you want to master networks, you have to grasp switching. Then switches are very large and they can be very expensive due to the fact switches have made networking very easy. So if you want to make your things easy, you have to on occasion have to pay more. So switches are quite expensive and very large. Cisco is one of the most biggest providers of switches. And yeah, switch is a good deal faster and smarter bridge. Now, in case of bridge, it just tests whether traffic used to be intended or not. It really did not check about the port numbers. But in case of switch, it also tests the port numbers. That is why switch is more smarter than bridge. For now, you can assume of a switch as a must, faster, smarter, and has more ports than a hub. And a bridge. In the subsequent lecture, we'll talk about the core of network, the coronary heart of the network. Did you guess it? If you guess router, it truly is right. Next lecture, we'll see something about routers. And finally, you will apprehend how routers to work in a complete internet tool. Okay, so in the remaining lecture, we saw that switches are layer 2 devices, which means they phase the network within the MAC addresses. Now, if you see the time period layer 3 switch, that means you are referring about a router and no longer a layer 2 switch. Sometimes routers are also called as layer 3 switches, so do not get confused between them. The term router and the layer 3 switch are interchangeable. Now, what is a router? A router is a network gadget used to connect many, sometimes disparate community segments together, combining them into what we call the internet work, that is the net that you are using today. A well-configured router can make wise decisions about the best way to get community data to its destination, so it gathers the information it desires to make these decisions based on the network's precise performance data. Another important factor is routers use IP addresses to make the forwarding decisions. They are considered as layer 3 devices due to the fact IP addresses are used at layer 3 and MAC addresses are used at layer 2. Now, on the screen you can see a Cisco router, which is a usual device which is used to connect to the internet. Now, routers that can be multi-confronted devices that behave like computers and do themselves with their very own complex operating systems. For example, Cisco routers that have their personal operating system. You can even think of them as CPUs, are definitely dedicated to the process of routing packets. And due to their complexity and flexibility, you can configure them to definitely perform the functions of different types of network devices. Now, routers can have many distinctive names in the beginning of this lect. I have told you that routers is additionally known as a layer 3 switch, or it is also acknowledged as a multi-layer switch. Remember, if you hear the word switch, it means layer 2 device. If you simply hear the word switch, it means layer 2 device. Routers, layer 3 switches and multi-layer switches imply the same. Now, as you can see on the screen, there is a router which is held to connect two different community segments. I'll make use of the laser pointer here. Yeah, so this is a router which is used to connect this network and this network. So if PC5, if this PC, okay. Now, if this PC desires to transfer the data to, let's say, PC3, so how will it go? It will transfer the data to this packet. Now, seeing that this is a hub and we have seen that hub transfers data to all different PCs, this data will be forwarded to all other PCs and then it will additionally forward to this PC as well. And after this, the hub sends the data to router. Now, router assessments if this data is present for which network. So as the intended data is for root PC3 of the other segment, the router properly routes records to the switch. Now on the switch, there is a packet, and in that packet, it is destined that it is for PC3. Okay, it is for PC3. Now we all know that swap does not broadcast the packet to all other hosts. It truly transfers this packet to PC3. So in this way, the networking device PC3 of segmental segment 1, this is the first segment, and this is the 2D segment. So PC1, PC5 or 4 segment successfully switch data to PC3. Now in this diagram, we're explaining, we understood the ideas of hub and switch. So I hope you're now comfortable with all the three devices, hub, router, and switch. I hope you apprehend these devices correctly due to the fact these are the most important devices in any networking, and you ought to understand the basic distinction between all these devices. Now, before moving ahead, you can see that I have taken substantial efforts to explain you all the principles in very basic form. So I request you to please leave a ranking for our course because leaving a ranking will also help different students to know about this course. Now, we are no longer doing this for the money purposes. We are just doing so that you can apprehend and if you find out that ours is the only route on computer networking which will explain you in each detail. So if you're enjoying this course, please write us a review. And if you have any grievances, let us understand through the question and reply section. We will try to address them as quick as possible. In the next lecture, we will talk about firewalls, then we will get to know introduction about IDAs and IPS and other devices. Okay, so now let us speak about firewall. You all have heard a word firewall whenever you go to purchase a new PC and the person who is going to sell you the PC says that, do no longer forget to install the firewall on your network. Or if you are working in a company, every so often the website or the application says you are being blocked by means of a firewall. You cannot access this website. Go again and go back to safe mode. So what precisely is a firewall? Yeah, let's answer this in this lecture. So basically, firewalls are your network's security guards. And to be real, they're in all likelihood the most important things to put in force on your network. That's because today's networks are nearly always connected 24 with the aid of 7 to the internet, a situation that makes security very crucial. A firewall protects your LAN sources from invaders that use internet for unprotected networks while concurrently preventing all or some of your LAN's computers. Now you can use firewalls to filter packets based on the guidelines that you or your network administrator create and configure strictly to eliminate the kind of packets which are not intended for your PC. For example, let's say you configure your firewall to discard all the packets having the protocol HTTP, which is Hypertext Switch Protocol, and it is not a secure protocol. Okay, wait, do not get confused between HTTP and HTTPS. We are going to see all these protocols in upcoming lectures. For time being, just apprehend that HPTP and HPTPs are two different protocols where HPTPs is extra secure protocol. So now if you employ a signature, or if you appoint a rule that says that please discard all the packets that have HTTP, your firewall will not allow a packet coming into from the internet having HTTP a protocol. So firewall can operate on a couple of layers of the OSI model, and some firewalls can operate up to the application layer, which have a incredible functionality on your PC. A firewall can either be a standalone black field or a software implementation placed on a server or a router. Either way, the firewall will have at least two community connections, one to the internet, that is the public side from where all the statistics comes to a network, and the other one is the network recognized as the private side. Now, sometimes there is a second firewall as you can see on the screen. Now, this firewall is used to connect to servers and equipment that can be regarded both public and private, like web email servers. I'll show you, just provide me a second. So you can see this part here. This is one firewall, this is the first firewall, this is the first firewall, this is the second firewall. In between, there are these servers that want to be protected. Now, these servers are directly accessible to the regular person, but there is a firewall in between. And these servers are also a personal property of a company. So the zone between the two different firewalls, okay? This region is known as Demilitarized Zone, that is DMZ, that is Demilitarized Zone. Firewalls are the first line of defense for a web-connected network. Without any place of firewall, any networks that is linked to the internet is essentially vast open to anyone with a little technical savvy who seeks to exploit all the resources. So for example, if you do not have this firewall in place, an attacker here can directly get admission to your servers. And if he's able to take advantage of one of these servers, he can directly have access to the total intranet. And in this way, your whole internet can get compromised. And that is why firewalls are really, clearly important. In the next lecture, we will have a look at the inclusion detection structures and the prevention systems as well. So they are also firewalls which guard your network, but they function. There are a couple of differences between firewall and the detection and prevention systems. Let us discover them in the next lecture. In the last lecture, we talked about the firewalls, and I additionally told you how firewall works. We also had an introduction to the demilitarized zones. In the upcoming sections of these courses, I'm going to provide an explanation in brief about the exact working of firewalls, how firewall offers packets and removes the unwanted scams and all these things. But for this section, for networking devices section, you just have to recognize what a firewall is and how it performs. Now, in this lecture, we are going to talk about the intrusion detection system, that is the IDs, and the intrusion prevention gadget, that is the IPS. Now, note that these two systems are absolutely different, though they have some similar performance between them. So what is an IDs? IDs stands for Intrusion Detection System. From the name, you can guess that intrusion detection system. If something is making an attempt to get into your network, this system will detect it and notify you. That's it. You acquired it. This is the example of this is the definition of intrusion detection system. If an attacker is trying to enter into your network, IDs will observe it and notify it to you. That is the intrusion detection system. An intrusion prevention system. So now you might have guessed from the definition of intrusion detection system, what is an intrusion prevention system, right? So as the name suggests, intrusion prevention gadget is prevention. Now look at the word prevention. So this gadget will stop someone or something from coming into your network. That's right. So IDs and IPS are very important in today's networks. They are the community security appliances that screen the networks and packets for malicious activity. An IDs is considered as a monitor mode machine, and it just records and tells you about your problems. Whereas an IPS can work in actual time to stop threats. So IDs is just like a safety guard who is just making an attempt to tell you, right, this person is attempting to enter, please do whatever you can. Whereas an IPS can work as a dog, a security dog, which virtually prevents or barks on the attacker and stops him from entering into your network. Now, the main distinction between the IDs and the IPS is that intrusion prevention system works in line to the actively prevent and block the intrusions that are detected, based on the regulations you set up. In the last lecture, we had talked about the rule setting in case of the firewalls. The equal thing applies here. Intrusion prevention systems can ship an alarm or create a correlation rules and remediation. They can drop malicious packets. They can provide malware safety and reset the connection of offending source hosts. I hope this was clear. If you have any doubts, please sense free to ask us. Now let us have a look at HIDS host-based intrusion detection system. What is HIDS? In a host primarily based intrusion detection system, software runs on one computer to discover abnormalities on that system alone by way of monitoring applications, system logs and event logs. Now, HIDS does no longer directly monitor gadget network traffic. Also, HIDS are mostly carried out end servers because they are a bear to manipulate if spread across giant computers on the network. Plus, if his ID's database is on the local laptop and its data becomes compromised by using an attack, the IDs could be corrupted too. So, as far as this lecture is concerned, you simply have to remember the full form of IDs IPS. Then you have to be aware the difference between IDs and IPS. And let me again remind you that IPS works in stay environment to prevent the malicious activities, whereas IDs simply notifies you if there is something malicious happening on your network. Now, in the subsequent lecture we are going to talk about access points. You have heard of get right of entry to points, but if you're now not sure, what does that mean? Make sure you understand and attend the subsequent lecture. So let us learn something about get admission to points. Now, before we move beforehand with this lecture, I would like to tell you that I'll be covering get admission to points APS in depth in Chapter 12 of Security in Networks, but I introduce them here. Understand that in get admission to point, commonly known as an AP through its initials, is just a hub that accepts Wi-Fi clients via analog Wi-Fi signals, and they access at layer 2, that is the fax link layer. Now, it's no secret that Wi-Fi is the key to all the networks in the world today. Even you are using your telephone, which is immediately wirelessly communicating through the web through your router. And wireless networks will be even prevalent in the future when all our home equipment have an IP address and communicate wirelessly to characteristic properly. For example, the ease of communicating on a network, the use of an access point rather of having to use an Ethernet cable has changed our world forever. Right now you do not even use Ethernet cables for large networks, right? There are wireless get right of entry to points or routers in place, and most possibly in today's world, everything around us is directly connected via access points. Now, you can see on the screen access factor is allowing that PC to connect to the nearby area network. So yeah, in short, that PC is using the Ethernet, that is the net for accessing resources on the web. And get entry to point plays a necessary role. So instead of connecting the LAN cable to the actual becoming a member of main cable, the laptop simply has to connect to the wireless get entry to point and it's done. So for example, if you are sitting on the first flooring and if the access point on the router and the LAN cable is on the second floor, you would have to use access point in between so that you can directly connect to the net through the access point. If get right of entry to point was no longer present, you have to pull out a long cable and insert to the main Ethernet cable to truly use the internet. I hope you have a clear picture of why access factors are really important and how they have modified the world. By allowing many users making an attempt to connect the local web network, they can connect. Now in one single click, the wireless client modulates a digital sign to an analog signal which the access factor can read and demodulate back into the digital signal. The get right of entry to point creates one collision domain and can solely run in half duplex, which is where you can describe access factor like a hub. In the next lecture, we will talk about Wi-Fi range extender, and then in the later part of this section, we will speak about the different contention techniques commonly used in the Internet. In this chapter, you learned the fundamentals of Ethernet networking, how hosts communicate on the community, and how CSMACD works in an Ethernet half-duplex network. I also confirmed you the differences between the different board charges and bitrates and also explained the Ethernet specs of different connections. And by the way, you'll be wise to study this area really well. So what do you need to remember? You want to understand the basic Ethernet communication. You want to know how hosts use hardware addresses to communicate on an Ethernet neighborhood area network. Then you need to apprehend Ethernet addressing, in which you should know the hexadecimal addressing scheme used to create an Ethernet tackle S. And finally, get yourself up with binary, decimal and hexadecimal addressing convergence. In the next section, we are going to talk about the networking devices that are most often employed in our day-to-day networks. Now, before moving in, advance with the contention methods, you first need to apprehend what a wireless range extender is. What can you guess? I'll supply you 5 seconds to answer or think. Think from the name. What is a Wi-Fi range extender? Yeah, so if we guess that this machine is used to extend the range of the device, then you are probably right. In some cases, you need the VLAN to prolong further than the technology in use is designed to deliver. In that SOS, we can install what is called a range extender. Now, these are radios and antennas that function in the same frequency or channel and receive the sign as the station would, and then we transmit it in the direction you desire your purchasers that are out of the reach of the original get right of entry to point. For example, as you can see on the screen here, I'll just mark it. Yeah, so you can see in this here, this individual is using in web network, but this guy desires to use the network, but the range of this get admission to point is only until here. It does not extend further. The range is here blocking here. So what to do? Now, they have established a wireless range extender here. You can see I've marked it with inexperienced color. Yes. Now, what this wireless range extender does is catches this frequency and then remits in all the perimeter available. So now this character here can access the Wi-Fi or the Internet of this room. So in short, Wi-Fi range extenders are basically used to prolong the range of the original get right of entry to point so that anyone who is out of vary of the original access factor can access the Internet without any issues. This is all for vary extender. In the next lecture, we will see what is meant by way of a contention method, and we will have introduction to 2 main rivalry methods that you must apprehend in computer networking. Because it is impossible for Wi-Fi stations to detect collisions, contention approach is required to arbitrate access to the network. This method is the CSMACA method, that is, collision avoid method, which is used. Now, it requires an extra involved process of checking for current wireless traffic earlier than a frame can be transmitted wirelessly. The stations must additionally acknowledge the frames upon receiving the frame or sending the frame. Now, let us have a seem to be at the process of CSMACA. Now, consider 2 PCs, laptop computer A and laptop B, and laptop A has to wirelessly ship a frame to laptop B, so earlier than sending, laptop A must take a look at for traffic in 2 ways. First, it performs a carrier sense, which capability it listens to see whether any radio waves are being received on its transmitter. So next, if the channel is now not clear, the traffic is being transmitted, laptop A will decrement an inside countdown mechanism called the random backoff algorithm, which we have simply discussed. This counter will have started counting after the last time this station is allowed to transmit, and all the stations will be counting down. They're character timers. Now, if laptop A checks for the profession sends sand, then there is no traffic and its timer hits 0, it will ship the frame and the frame is obtained to the access point. Now, the access factor sends an acknowledgement back to the laptop A, announcing that it has received a frame from laptop computer A until that acknowledgement is received by laptop computer A. All other stations must stay silent. This is very important. Unless and until the laptop A receives acknowledgement from the get right of entry to point that it is said, you have received your frame, so I'll do my work now. Now, until this conversation, all other stations on the network ought to remain silent. The access factor will catch the frame where it already may have other cached frames that want to be relayed to other stations. Each frame that the get entry to point needs to relay have to wait its turn to send the body using the same mechanism that we have seen. Now, when the frames flip comes up in the cache queue, the frame from laptop computer A will be relayed to laptop B and laptop B sends an acknowledgement lower back to the access point pronouncing that, hey dude, I have received an acknowledgement, I have received a body from you. So this is the acknowledgement. And all other stations must once more remain silent. So this was the working of CSMACA method, rivalry. Method for wireless networks. Now, if you have not understood the working, I recommend you to go back and see the video once more so that you have a clear shot at CSMACA method. Again, if you have any doubts, please feel free to ask us in the Q&A. A section the place we will try to answer your questions inside 48 hours. And again, if you're taking part in this course, I really request you to please leave a ranking for our course. You can see the rating tab on the right-hand pinnacle corner of your laptop or an internet site if you're using a laptop computer machine. In the next lecture, we will see a different rivalry method which is used for a wired network. And I hope you understand the distinction between these two mechanisms. In the previous two lectures, we have discussed the rivalry method of carrier sends MA and alongside with collision avoidance. And in this, we will see carrier sends multiple axis with collision detection. Let's seem to be at the difference between them. What is CSMACD? When the device sending the body is transmitting onto a wired network, the CSMACD contention method is used. This technique is somewhat more environment friendly because it is possible for wired computer systems to detect collisions while Wi-Fi stations cannot detect it. When a host's or a router's interface desires to send a frame, it checks the wire and if no visitors is detected, it sends it without checking a random backoff time. However, it continues to pay attention and if it detects that a collision has occurred, it sends out a jam signal. It sends out a jam signal that requires all the stations to quit transmitting. Then the two computers that were concerned in the collision will both wait a random amount of time, that is a random lower backoff algorithm, and the counters will decrement to 0. So instead of using a random wreck-off algorithm every time a transmission occurs, Ethernet uses its potential to detect collisions and uses this timer solely when required, which makes the process more efficient. I hope you have an overview of CSMACD. In the subsequent lecture, we'll discuss the operation of CSMACD like we have mentioned the operation of CSMACA method. Okay, great. In the last lecture we have seen the introduction to service sends multiple access with collision detection, which is mainly used in the wired network, and CSMACA is used for wireless networks. Now, how does CSMAC really works? Well, the rivalry method is used in Ethernet, and the mechanism, it helps to minimize, but it does no longer eliminate collisions. I have already said in the preceding lecture. Now, the fourth step is when a device needs to transmit, it tests the wire. If the transmission is already under the way the device can tell, this is known as carrier sense. Now, why did I use the word wire? Because in this lecture, in this contention method, the medium is definitely the wire, whereas in the cybersecurity method, the medium was wireless medium. Second step, if the wire is clear, the machine will transmit even as it is transmitting as it performs carrier sense. Okay, so we have finished this step. We have completed this step. Third step, if another host is sending simultaneously, there will be a collision, right? The collision is detected by each the devices through carrier sense. Now, each the devices will issue a jam sign. Both the devices will issue a jam sign to all the devices, which indicates them to not transmit any frames. Then each of the devices will increment a retransmission counter. Now, this is a cumulative total of the range of times this frame has been transmitted and a collision has occurred. So the counter has a most number at which the device aborts the transmission of the frame. And finally, each the device calculate a random amount of time and will wait for that quantity of time before transmitting again. Now, in most of the cases, because each the devices choose random quantities of time to wait, another collision will most probably no longer occur because the time is no longer same. The time is not same for each the devices as it can vary. And that is why cybersecurity works perfectly in the wired network. This was once all for the contention methods. We have seen two rivalry methods. To summarize, the two methods are cybersecurity and cybersecurity. Cybersecurity works perfectly for Wi-Fi networks and cybersecurity works best for the wired networks. That is the Ethernet. The CA stands for collision avoidance and the CD stands for collision detection. That's it, folks, for this lecture. In the subsequent lecture, we will have introduction to one of the most important servers in the computer networking history, and that is the DHCP server. That is the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. I will see you in the subsequent lecture. Okay, so let's start. The interesting subject matter of DHCP server, even though I'm going to get into the final factors of DHCP in Chapter 6, Introduction to the Internet Protocol, where we are going to learn the whole thing about the IP. I just want to provide you some basic insight into this carrier server here. So let us get started. In a sense, DHCP server, that is Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, as the name suggests, assigns IP addresses to hosts. Now, this protocol gives us a whole lot easier way to administer by automatically presenting the IP information than the alternative and tedious technique of static IP addressing. Now, a DHCP server is configured by the administrator with a pool of addresses which can get some addresses of the limits. Now, these are called as IP addresses used through the DHCP server. DHCP server isn't on the same section as the DHCP client. And this is one of the main hitch of the DHCP server. The broadcast won't be obtained by the server because through default, routers will not forward broadcast. Now, this property of router, I have already advised you in the previous lectures. Now, there's a discern on the screen. I want you to pay whole attention to that figure. Now in the figure, RO uter A is configured with the IP helper address command on the interface E0 of the router. Let me exhibit you router A. Here is router A is configured with address E0 on its interface. The router A will forward that request as a unicast, meaning as an alternative of a broadcast. The packet now has destination IP address of the DHCP server. See, this is the DHCP server. So, as proven in the figure, you can configure router A to forward these requests and even use multiple DHCP servers for redundancy if needed. You can see right here are the multiple DHCP servers. This works because the router has been configured to head the request to a single server using a unicast, or by sending the request to a couple of servers via a directed broadcast so you can see the router is going to forward single request here. Now, personally, most of the time I use a Windows server to act as a DHCP server for my whole internet work and have my routers forward the client requests. Now, it is feasible to have a DHCP server on every network segment, however that is not necessary due to the fact of the router's forwarding ability. Now, in the next lecture, I'm going to tell you about the DHCP operations in which you are going to learn if when a device or when a host processes the DHCP server for IP address, how is that process exactly takes location in the real internet network. So in the next lecture, let us see the DHCP operations. Okay, in the ultimate lecture we had introduction to the DHCP server. And as I said, I'm going to talk about the DHCP server operations in this lecture. So now let us say this PC is your PC. Let me use the pen. Yes, this PC is your PC and this is the DHCP server. Okay, so now what happens? Now, the first step is the DHCP client broadcast the DHCP find out message, which means that the client or the host in this case, which is your machine, will ask the DHCP server for an IP address. Now, I desire to tell you one thing that you would have a query in your mind that why would my PC need an IP address? I already have an IP address. Well, when you log into the internet your IP tackle keeps on changing, right? You do not have the one static IP address. When you are linked to the internet, your PC has a separate IP address and a separate MAC address, which is hard-coded MAC address, and the MAC tackle doesn't change, but your IP can change. So when you join to the VPN, at that time, what your host does is your host asks the VPN's DHCP server to give you an IP address. Now, the next step is the DHCP server replies with the DHCP provide message, saying that, hey, this is the IP address or the pool of IP tackle which I'm giving you. So if you're okay with it, simply let me know this is the IP address. Now your host will say, DHCP client responds with DHCP request message. It says, okay, I would like to have this IP address, so please provide me this IP address. And finally, the DHCP server completes with DHCP acknowledgement message. And after this step is done, your PC will finally get the IP address. And in this way, DHCP server actually works. Now, if you want to provide address from a DHCP server to hosts that are earned on the equal local area network, you can configure your router to relay or ahead the DHCP client requests. Don't worry, let me explain you in easy words. For example, let us say, you have two networks. You have two networks. Consider this as the A network and consider this as a community and consider this as the B network. So if there are two networks and your host is right here and your DHCP client is here, your DHCP server is here. Now you need to furnish addresses, but this DHCP server has already been full of the addresses. It doesn't have any greater addresses. So, what you do is you want addresses from this DHCP server. But this is in another community and you are here. So what would you do? Now first you will contact this DHCP server for pool of addresses. But this DHCP server says that, hey, I don't have any more addresses as the addresses are full. So what is DHCP relay is definitely this server transfers the requests or basically forwards the request to this server here. And therefore, in this way, this DHCP server can respond return to this server, and then this server can respond back to you to get your IP address.
This whole process is called as DHCP relay or DHCP forward. Okay, congratulations. I'm truly proud that you have made it till this lecture, and it takes real enthusiasm and actual motivation to do. Till now, we have completed the important networking devices that will be required in your coursework or during your interview preparations. In the subsequent lecture, we will have an introduction to other network devices. It additionally exists. And I'm pretty sure that no different course on the internet or on any different platform will teach you these other devices. So it is my humble request that if you're really taking part in this course, I would just expect a ranking from your side. It almost takes only 30 seconds to provide a rating. That's all instructors can expect from you. And if you motivate us, your remarks really motivates us to do more courses. So in the subsequent lecture, we are going to start or have an introduction to the other community devices that are really, very important from networking factor of view. Okay, great. Now, in addition to the other networking devices that we have already seen, there are different specialized devices which are without a doubt important in computer networking. Now, you have to actively take part in moving the network data, and these units help pretty tons while you're transferring information from one point to another point. Well, the first machine that we're going to see is multi-layer switch. Then we are going to talk about what is a load balancer. Now, multi-layer switch, you know what is multi-layer switch? I do not need to tell you. Then it is DNS server, you have heard the area name system. Then proxy server, which we all use when downloading different things. Then encryption devices, analog modem, packet shaper, VPN concentrator, media converter, and VoIP endpoint. VoIP is essentially voice over internet protocol. Now, make sure that I'm not going to go into every element of these devices, but I'm just going to supply you an overview so that if anyone asks you, hey, please tell me what is a proxy server? You will honestly be able to answer all these questions. So let us get started with the multi-layer switch. Okay, so in this lecture, we are going to talk about multi-layer change and load balancer. So this is a multi-layer switch. You can see on the screen, it has multiple layers. A multi-layer switch, MLS, is a computer networking gadget that switches on open systems interconnected, that is OC layers layer 2, that is the data hyperlink layer. It is like an ordinary network switch, however it provides routing. A 24-port multi-layer switch offers you the best of both worlds. It operates at layer 3 while providing 24 collision domains, which a router ought to not do. 24 collision domains, which means 24 unique ports and 24 different domains so that there can be minimal or less collision avoidance. Now, the essential difference between the packet switching operation of a router and that of a layer 3 or a multi-layer change lies in the physical implementation. In routers, packet switching takes place the usage of a microprocessor, whereas layer 3 switch handles this by way of using application-precise integrated circuit that is ASIC hardware. On the screen, there is a picture of layer 3 switch. You can see that they look like layer 2 switches, however they are multi-layers, and the major difference lies in the hardware internal of the multi-layer switch and the operating system. Now, what is a load balancer? From the title you can guess that this device may be reducing the load. Well, you are right. Your average router simply sends incoming packets to the specified correlative IP addresses on the network. But a load balancer can actually ship the incoming packets to multiple machines hidden behind one IP address. Cool, right? I mean, it clearly reduces the load. Today's load balancing routers follow various policies to determine specifically how they will route community traffic depending upon your needs. You can set rules primarily based on the least load, fault tolerance, fastest response time, or you can end up simply dividing outbound requests for smooth network operation. Think about this scenario. Okay, say you have an internet site where people are putting orders for the stuff you have got for sale. Obviously, the orders placed fluctuate in size and the rate at which they come in additionally varies. You definitely wouldn't prefer your servers becoming so overloaded that they hose up and crash your site, causing you to lose a hell lot of money. Now, what would you do? That's the place the load balancing of the traffic comes into picture. Because even if one of the servers freezes, your customers will nonetheless be able to access your website and place orders. That is why in today's world, websites like Google, Amazon, Apple, or IBM, there are a hell lot of examples which actually use load balancers because they have a lot of site visitors coming from all over the globe. Just imagine Amazon, how it might be dealing with the requests that are coming throughout the globe, right? With the help of load balancer, you bought it right. In the next lecture, we are going to talk about the DNA server, which is one of the most essential topics in computer networking. Okay, that's adequate for now. Thank you so much for being with me until the end of this video. Till the subsequent part, keep cool and stay anonymous.